Welcome back, everybody. Wednesday, February 1st. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report, here to talk about the latest news from Ukraine. Every day, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Anyway, hello, folks. I will get the TikTokers rolling while we are waiting here. Go live. All right. Introduce yourselves, guys. Say where you're from if you would. Here we go. We're rolling on TikTok now. There we go. Oh, and just a reminder, I'm on multi screens here. So I've got like YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter over with you guys. And I've got the TikTok folks over on my iPad. Hello, TikTok folks. Welcome. And as always, we wait just a couple minutes, minute or two for folks. Oh, hello, Tyson Ann. I've got your mod thing fixed on Discord. Yes. And for Geeky Audrey, too. Somehow it got messed up. Anyway, hello, everybody. Hello, TikTokers. Hey, guys. So, yes, as always, we wait a minute or two just to get a critical mass of you guys arriving. And then I will start the show. Or I already started the show, soft start, but I will start the news. Lithuania. Hello, Lithuania. Hello, Benji. Thank you for the pause. Always excited. I get excited. I mean, I'm in the States, so I don't want to sound like I'm not excited seeing all you Americans here, but I get particularly excited seeing the foreigners, the non-Americans. I know we're foreigners to you as well. Who was that? Ellie? Elle? Oh, thank you, Elle, for the heart there. Caribbean. I don't know that we've had Caribbean too much. Not that I recall. Welcome, Caribbean. Rich from PA, Georgia, Ireland. We got a lot of Irelands. Irish. Muskoka, Canada. I've never heard of that. Never heard of that. Interesting. I mean, Canada, of course. Thank you, Andrew, for the hat. Anyway, we're good. We got a critical mass on TikTok. Thanks for the hat there, Annie. All right, I will get rolling, guys. Welcome, TikTokers. Welcome, YouTubers. Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show that I do every Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., and we talk about the latest news from Ukraine, and then I take your guys' questions in the second half of the show. The way you submit them on TikTok, easiest way to submit questions is go to my profile, hit the Q&A link, and submit them there. That way they kind of come up in order, and it's more order. On the screen, they kind of flit away. For you guys, obviously use the comment box. I do appreciate these super chat questions, super gifts, super gifts, whatever you want to call them, super stickers, and the gifts on TikTok, because I do this full time. I've been doing it full time since the war broke out almost a year ago now. And I literally rely on you guys to pay the bills. So thank you for doing that. And please keep them coming. Thank you for the hat there, Ellie. I will always try to do a shout out when I see the gifts. Let's get rolling. So a Russian missile hit a residential building in the Ukrainian town. Was this in Liman? I'm trying to recall if it was Kramatorsk, in the Ukrainian town of Kramatorsk in the eastern Donetsk region. Oh, we do have Kramatorsk. Yes, we have Kramatorsk on our handy dandy map. Kramatorsk is right here. Hey, thanks for the hat there, Harold. Kramatorsk is right here. You will notice, any of you who have a good eye for this, that it is right next to Bakhmut. Bakhmut is where all the big fighting's been going on the last few weeks. I mean, Bakhmut, the fighting's been going on for 6 months, but the biggest fighting has been happening in the last few weeks. Bakhmut is right here. Kramatorsk is right here nearby. Well, the Russians attacked a residential building in Kramatorsk today, destroyed the building entirely. Oh, hi, Mishanya. Somebody is actually from Bakhmut. Wow, welcome. Sorry for all the trouble you guys are going through. So the Russians attacked a residential building, destroyed it entirely. People were heard screaming under the rubble. A Ukrainian official has now confirmed at least 2 people are dead, 7 more wounded, but a lot of people are still trapped in the rubble. Thank you, Crusher, for the gift there. Boris Johnson, one of the big stories today is Boris Johnson, the former British Prime Minister. He is in the States this week in Washington, D.C., and very interestingly, Johnson, you may recall, right, has been a huge defender of Ukraine, a huge supporter of Ukraine. And he is in the States this week, of all things, lobbying Republican senators and Republican members of the Congress overall to support Ukraine and to continue supporting with funding, which has struck me as very interesting. Not something we often see. We usually see, for example, foreign leaders will come to America. Thank you, Ellen. And they will, lobby on behalf of their own country. But you don't usually see them making an argument for a third country, mind you, one that they're not being paid for. It's not like Johnson's doing this, for money. Just very interesting. So among the other and frankly, very important, because as I'm sure you guys know, the polls have been getting worse in America regarding Ukraine. They still have majority support, but it's getting worse. Specifically among Republicans, especially, it's getting worse. Um, we've got a problem here with the MAGA Republicans are the least supportive because Donald Trump has been very unsupportive, very critical of Ukraine, very supportive of Putin, and Fox News has been towing the Trump line, and they have also been very supportive of Putin. I mean, outright supportive of Putin and Russia overall, which is crazy, and also very critical of Ukraine. So we've had a problem with MAGA Republicans. And Johnson is concerned, as I think the rest of us are, that the U.S. House of Representatives now, Johnson has not said this, but I guarantee you this is why he's here. The U.S. House of Representatives is now controlled by Republicans, but it is a MAGA wing of the Republican Party that controls the U.S. House. And unlike the Senate, the House Republican leadership, not clear that they're so supportive of Ukraine because of the MAGA contingent. In the Senate, the Republicans are very supportive. You've got Rand Paul is probably the only one who's bad, and it's not because he's MAGA. I don't even think he is. He's just kind of a Russia lover. It's kind of weird. He's just very sympathetic to Putin, and nobody kind of knows why. It's a little creepy. But otherwise, the Republicans in the Senate, thank you, Ellen, for the gift, are very supportive. I mean, crazy. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, crazy supportive of defending Ukraine. So in any case, McConnell, Bojo is here, Boris Johnson, and he's been saying a lot of interesting things today. I wanted to sort of walk you through some of it because I thought his arguments were very well played. Johnson, first of all, has been arguing for F-16s for the U.S. and NATO to be providing fighter jets to Ukraine. Let me see. Did I have a quote here? I've got a general paraphrase saying it was time to give Kyiv the tools, including F-16s, to reclaim the land taken by Putin. He also, this was interesting. He also said that he now supports ending the ambiguity with regards to Ukraine joining NATO. I was reading sort of more articles about this, and Johnson was saying that initially he thought it was ridiculous. He said the idea of Ukraine joining NATO was ridiculous. He blew it off. But now things have changed entirely, which is really interesting. I mean, I think it's as much as I think Johnson has. I was mentioning this to you guys last night. Johnson is in a weird position. Boris Johnson, the former British Prime Minister. For the Brits, very controversial, not very loved by a lot of Brits. For Americans, with regards to the war, at least, he developed kind of a, oh, I see we've got a hater on. Sorry. Thank you for the hat there, Alan. I've always got to respond to these people. Folks, go ahead and ban this William F. Spencer guy because he's a troll. He could be a far left troll. He could be a Russian troll. Hard to say. But Michael Tracy, the kind of lunatic far left guy who, agrees with the far right folks, has been putting out this line, when do your kids go to Ukraine? Well, honestly, when do anybody's kids go to Ukraine? Because literally nobody's kids are going to Ukraine. I mean, there's nobody. I mean, the far left crazies, I mean, and basically the America haters are, well, they hate all of our countries, really. And they love Putin and Russia. They love sort of the dictators, right? And the far right crazies, who also, frankly, don't love America or any of our countries. They've come together on this notion of, they think the best talking point is, are you willing to send your children to war? And I'm like, well, we're not actually sending anybody's children to war, so it's really not a problem, right? We're giving Ukraine weapons and money. Ukraine has decided, oh, aren't they crazy, to maybe fight back against a genocide. Crazy, isn't it? I know. Thank you, Luis, for the hat there. And Bell. Ukraine decided, hey, genocide, bad thing. Maybe we don't want our women and kids getting raped and killed. Literally, both have been happening to women and children. They've been doing this too. And we thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to maybe save a population of 43 million people from getting slaughtered and wiped off the planet? Because, we've had a few too many genocides in the last 100 years. And frankly, the world has not been very good about stepping up to those genocides. Even World War II took a lot of us, US included, a little bit of time to get involved. So, and even then, the whole issue about bombing the railroad tracks, not really clear. In history, thank you for the gift there on TikTok. Let me see real quick. Who was that? They're confetti. Matt. Thank you, Matt, for that. But in any case, it drives me a little crazy because and I've told you guys this before. One of the things that really ticks me off is when people use, um, Glenn Greenwald does this a lot, actually. They use fake arguments in order to try to trick you. Basically, they try to be a little too smart by half, and they always will throw arguments at you that you kind of agree with, right? Like, I don't have children, but I wouldn't want my children going and dying in a war. Who would, right? So they throw out well, when are you going to send your children to war in Ukraine? And it's like, well, never, because I don't have any. Second of all, never, because no one's children are going to war in Ukraine other than the Ukrainians. And it's not like they chose the war. The war kind of happened. So what's your freaking point? Right? Who knows what their point is? Actually, we do know what their point is. Thank you, Grayson, for the hat. Their point is they don't really like this country. They don't like any of our countries. They really like the dictatorships. They really like Russia. Big part of the reason they like Russia, of course, goes back to the whole Soviet Union thing. A lot of these folks, certainly on the left, the far left, actually, I think this is exactly it. On the far left, it's the love of the Soviets. You see the same people that are constantly bringing this stuff up. They're the same people, actually, that defended the Russians when we were, thank you, Crusher, for the galaxy there. That's one of my faves. A lot of us were holding Russia accountable. For example, I'm going on a tangent, but it's a Russia tangent, so it's okay. About 10 years ago, Putin was basically using neo-Nazis in Russia. They've got a lot of them, and they let them just run rampant to terrorize the LGBT community there. These neo-Nazis would go and they would kidnap gay and trans Russians. They would torture them on camera, like videotape torturing them, and then they would post the video on Russian social media services like VKontakte. And the Russian government did nothing about it because, of course, they aren't going to defend gay and trans people, right? The Russians, Putin uses the LGBT issue as one of his big reasons for invading Ukraine, right? The whole, the debauchery of the West, and they're so tolerant of gay and transgender people, right? Oh, evil. And this is part of the argument they use for why they must stop the evil West from, taking over Ukraine and blah, 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 this kind of stuff. In any case, it's I'm doing this again where I'm going on one of my tangents about Russia and then forgetting what I was telling you. But anyway, I was just trying to tell you because basically they were using these neo-Nazis. The Russians were refusing to stand up to them. They were reported to them. Thank you, Inspired Woman. These guys would film themselves on camera, these neo-Nazis terrorizing the gays, and say their names. I remember one woman, I'm forgetting her name now. One of the guys actually finally died in prison. Oh well. Maxime, what was his last name? Oh my God. I'm forgetting his stupid name he used. Tesak. Tesak was the guy's name. Total. In any case. But whatever. But my point here is these guys really take us back to how we got on this tangent because we had the little hate around there. These guys love to lie. Anyway, just be aware of it. All right. Sorry. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Thank you, Chris, for that. So Boris Johnson and NATO F-16s, Johnson is arguing in Washington today that NATO should be sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. The current British Prime Minister's office said that it is not practical to send jets at this point. And the British Defense Secretary came out, thank you, Mark, for the hat, came out and said that he is neither, what was the exact phrase? He's neither ruling anything in nor ruling anything out. So basically, trying to find my shoe under here as I talk to you guys. Hello, cold feet. Basically trying to make it where they're not saying no, but they're definitely not saying yes. And we've seen a cooling off in the last couple of days from really the Biden administration, the Brits, pretty much everybody but the French. Even the Poles have cooled down a little on all the talk of providing fighter jets. So I don't think that's happening anytime soon. More Boris Johnson on Ukraine and Taiwan. This was another interesting point he brought up. We've talked about it before, but actually, let me step back a second. One of the concerns I've had with this war has been, I don't want to say the marketing of it because that cheapens it. It's not marketing. It's not like we're selling a product, but I've worked in politics since 1989 for over 30 years now. Thank you, Mark. And one of the things I've learned in politics over the year, and frankly, any of you really, I think most of you who work in businesses will appreciate this too. You've got to sell what you're doing, right? Whether it's a product, whether it's yourself applying for a job, right? It's fine to put down your qualifications, but you've got to sell yourself. The same thing works in public policy, whether it's domestic policy, whether it's foreign policy. You got to sell what you're doing to the public at large. And I've had a big complaint with Biden on all of this because I don't think Biden has been trying to sell, I say the war, but meaning why it is that we're supporting Ukraine. He doesn't do a very good job of it. I will say Biden is not a good speaker. It may be because of his age. I mean, he might have been a better speaker early on. Thank you, Mark. He might have been a better speaker years ago, but he's not very good right now. And he does a lousy job whenever he's going public and trying to explain the war. He never really has. I mean, again, I fault him for it. I don't know that it's his fault he can't speak, but honestly, what is his fault is, you know what? Then get a lot of surrogates out there who are always explaining to people. Granted, Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation. Thank you, Mark, for the origami. But Pete is an incredible speaker. Pete can, like Bill Clinton, speak. Pete can, distill complicated ideas into something people can understand and relate to. Barack Obama, another one who can do that. Frankly, Bill Clinton should be out there explaining the war. Get some more Republicans. There are a lot of Republicans. Thank you, Marcy. I, at the beginning of the show, was talking about Republicans supporting the war, and Trump doesn't. The MAGA crowd, not so good. A lot of you, some of you are, obviously, but a lot of you, not so good. Thought Fox News, terrible. But you've got a lot of Republicans that are great. Mitch McConnell's great. Mitch McConnell should be out there selling the war more. Thank you, Matt, for that, and Alan for the hat. I just, and frankly, Biden, I think, should coordinate this. We need to explain to people better why it is that this war matters. And I think Johnson does a good job, and I'm glad he's out there doing it. So anyway, one of the reasons we should care about the war is China and Taiwan. Let me have Johnson read Johnson's quote. Don't forget the message that Putin's success would send to China. This is a dry run for Xi, who's the Chinese leader. Thank you, Green Thumb, for the hat there. There is a very good reason why Beijing decided to greenlight this appalling operation. He's talking about when Putin went to China right before the war started, right before the Russian invasion, and basically, the world seems to think that it was very intentional timing as far as why Putin went to China literally a couple of weeks before the invasion, okay? And the thinking is that he went to give the Chinese a head up because they're his big ally, make sure China was still on board, which they are. In any case, there you go. So Johnson says there's a very good reason why Beijing, thank you, Fred, for the hat. There's a very good reason why Beijing decided to greenlight this appalling operation, or to acquiesce in it at least. They wanted to see how it will go because the Chinese have objectives of their own. He's talking about Taiwan and basically saying, and there's a lot of concern, especially over the coming years, as to whether China is going to invade Taiwan and try to take it back. The West is very opposed to that. The Biden administration has said they would go to war over it. We would send U.S. troops, but there's a lot of concern. Thank you, Farrell. And what Johnson is saying is and I think he's right in this, thank you, Crusher, is that the Chinese are looking at this. Yep, I see Sivo. I will get to 6 Evo next. That the Chinese are looking at this as a test run and saying, okay, how will the world react to invading another country and basically trying to eat it up? Pac-Man, literally suck it up, make it, envelop it, make it a part of your own country, right? And they want to see how the world will react, how will the United Nations react, and especially how will the West and NATO react. And what they saw with Ukraine is pretty horrifying, not horrifying in a bad way for the West, horrifying in a bad way for China, right? They saw that the United Nations overwhelmingly criticized it, that nations around the world are not happy. They saw the economic sanctions, brutal economic sanctions. Obviously, we wish that Russia were suffering more from the economic sanctions, right? That it was causing more damage to put more influence on Russia. But nonetheless, the sanctions have been brutal, right? We saw the world come together and support Ukraine economically and militarily, and especially now militarily, in an incredible way. If you're China, or frankly any country thinking of doing something similar, you're looking at this and you're saying, you know what? This is a problem. If I want to do this, China especially. China's biggest interest is its economy. China needs that economy to keep growing at like 8% a year in order to meet its targets for the country growing. When I say growing, I don't mean that as sort of a tautology, but I mean, China is still poor country in some ways. In some, they're not as wealthy as the countries in the West. I mean, the economy is huge, but there's 1.5 billion people. The people are still not very wealthy. They need the economy growing, 8% a year for the next foreseeable future, like it has been for the last 50 years, I think 50, 60 years, the Chinese economy. Well, it's not anymore. It's growing 3% a year. In the West, that would be considered healthy growth. In China, it's not. So China's very worried about their economy. So the idea that invading Taiwan could put massive sanctions on China, upending its economy entirely, that's a concern. So anyway, Johnson's right about that. Let me tell you really quick, a quick little break here, and then I've got more news. I'll tell you a little bit about my Discord community. We've got a Discord community, discord.aravosis.com. You can find the link in my TikTok, just in my profile, the Linktree link. Click it, and all my links are there, including the Discord. You guys can just go to aravosis.com, and then I swear to God, I will go next for 6 Evo or Bevo, or depending what language that is. You will be next question. But on Discord, one of the neat things we've got is we're doing auctions, and I'm using the auctions to basically make money to provide aid to Ukraine, and also to help pay for myself doing this, because I am doing it full time, not taking any salary, literally, other than what you guys are giving me. So just to show you one last time, not one last time, but I'll show you again real quick. We're auctioning off a number of things. We've got some cool Ukrainian commemorative stamps. These are the stamps honoring the Ukrainian tanks. Basically stealing the Ukrainian tractors stealing the Russian tanks. Very cool. Those are auctioning. We've got really cool bracelets made by the Ukrainian government. These are to commemorate the battle at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. Remember the 2,000 Ukrainian troops that were fighting the 14,000 Russians for about 2 months. Well, the Ukrainian government took steel from that plant, the last batch of steel, minted it basically, and made this bracelet. You can see they stamped the Ukrainian trident on there. Show you guys the Ukrainian trident. And we've got a couple of these. We still got 3 or 4 of these left. We're auctioning them off. And the final thing, and this one, by the way, we've only got a few boxes left. This one, the auction finishes tomorrow on this one. This is a public auction, so meaning any of you guys can go and bid. This is a box from the Ukrainian charity. They're calling themselves the Orc Busters, because the Ukrainians call the Russian troops, thank you, Crusher, they call the Russian troops orcs from Lord of the Rings. That's the intentional connotation they're making. I've got here a box with a nice explanation inside, showing a map and a plane, pieces of a Russian fighter jet shot down over Ukraine. Very, 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 to me, I love this stuff. Very cool. They've got a whole little thing explaining what it is, which plane it was, the pilot. I did some research on the pilot. The pilot has been captured, his information, really cool stuff. Anyway, check it out, guys. Appreciate you going in discord.aravosis.com and helping me out, helping Ukrainians out, and bid away. So check it out. All right, let's keep going. I see the Russian trolls are still all over TikTok. God, they're angry. Angry people, angry people. Thank you, Alan, for the hat there. What else we got here? Boris Johnson weighing in about nukes, about nuclear weapons, and why he doesn't think Putin will use nukes. Thank you, Jedamom, for the musical notes. I thought this was interesting because the argument I've been giving, and you guys ask a lot, so it's always interesting to bring it up and useful, I think, to talk about it. The argument I make a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking 6 Evo. I'm forgetting had a question on YouTube. Let me bring this up first. Thoughts on the Kremlin? Thank you, Nurse, for the scratch. Thoughts on the Kremlin saying the GLSDB can escalate. So the GLSDB is the ground launched. Ground launched small diameter bomb. That's it. It is the weapon that Reuters reported yesterday that the U.S. is expected to include in the new $2 billion aid package, military aid package, that the U.S. may announce as early as this week for Ukraine. And what's neat about the GLSDB, it's a bomb that fits on a rocket, and we would provide both to Ukraine. And it's range. I believe I Googled this to check it out. I'm 99% sure it can be fired from a HIMARS, which we've already provided to Ukraine. Thank you, Timothy, for the drum set. And the range of this rocket with the bomb is 94 miles or 150 kilometers. Now, normally when they give the range, there's some wiggle room. So it might even be 100, 105, 110 miles. Thank you, Bonnie, for the galaxy there. Well, this range, let's say it's 94 miles. The current weapons we're providing to Ukraine, the missiles for the HIMARS, can only go 60 miles. Now, it's something like 40, 45 miles, but in fact, it's really 60 miles, okay? This can go 94 miles. So currently, we're giving rockets that can go 60 miles or 100 kilometers. Thank you, Samantha, for the hat. We are looking at giving them this new bomb, the GLSDB, and the rockets that it goes on that can go 94 miles or 150 kilometers, and that's a huge difference. The reason it's a huge difference is because the Russians, were not very smart early in the war, and frankly, even recently. They've been running a very bad war. And one of the things they were really stupidly doing, the Russians love to put all of their ammunition together. So they put all their ammunition together like in one big pile, which makes it fun to blow up because all you need to do is hit it once and all of it goes, right? So that's the first thing. Yes, it can. Ben says it can be fired by the HIMARS. That's what I thought. That's good. They put all their ammunition together. They would put it like near the railroad tracks. Anyway, it was easy for the Ukrainians to hit. Finally, the Russians got smart and said, hey, I mean, again, those of you who don't do this for a living are going to listen to this and go, even you are going to go, that's insane. The Russians only a short while ago said, hey, if the American missiles can go 60 miles, maybe we should be putting our ammunition, our military barracks, and our ammunition, our military barracks, and our command and control, our military headquarters, more than 60 miles away from the Ukrainian troops. Wouldn't that be a good idea? So the Russians finally did this. Well, if we give the Ukrainians a missile that can go almost 100 miles, it means that all of a sudden we can hit all of the Russian ammunition again. The Ukrainians can hit all the Russian ammunition again. They can hit all of the Russian command and control, all of the Russian barracks. So this is a big deal. Now, the Ukrainians want the missiles that go 200 miles, right? Twice as far, but still, this is a big deal. So, escalate. Yeah, of course it's an escalation. I mean, all of this, the Russians love to use the word escalate. And frankly, we've fallen into the trap, right? The French the other day, they're not opposed. The French said they're not opposed to sending fighter jets to Ukraine, but they wouldn't want to send a weapon that would escalate. What the hell does that mean, right? Escalate. I mean, is it a weapon that is a quantum leap better than what there was before? Yes, than what we're giving them. Will it significantly help Ukraine do more damage to the Russians? Yes. So is that an escalation? I guess. I mean, I just don't care. I mean, I really don't. I don't understand why we sort of fall for this. Now, it is a bluff. I mean, Fifit is saying on TikTok, it is a bluff from the Russians. Now, what it really means, thank you, Loyalty, for the hat. What escalation really means is America and Europe worrying, oh my God, will the Russians use nuclear weapons if we help Ukraine too effectively? That's what escalate means. Escalate is a euphemism for will Russia use nuclear weapons? That's what it really is. Because otherwise, what else is Russia going to do, right? Fight harder? I mean, right? Kill civilians? Already are. Rape and pillage? Already are, right? All they could do extra right now is use nukes. And as we've talked about before, don't think it's going to happen. Those are my thoughts on Russia saying it's escalating. It's a bluff, and it's been a bluff for 11 months of the war. They're not going to do it. Oh, actually, I was going to read you. Oh, actually, that's the next thing I was going to talk about. Yeah, Boris Johnson talking about why Russia won't use nukes. Let me read that, and then Lilia, I'm going to pull up your question so I don't forget it. But let me tell you really quick Boris Johnson's explanation of why he thinks Russia won't use nukes. Putin won't use nuclear weapons because he would instantly extinguish the last flicker of Chinese support. He would lose every one of the world's swing voters from India to Africa to Latin America. He would terrify his own people who would live in dread of the consequences for them. He would plunge Russia into such a cryogenic freeze of economic isolation. I love that. A cryogenic freeze of economic isolation as to make the present sanctions regimes seem like a blessing. And I agree. So that's what I think of that. Lilia is asking, okay, non-Ukraine question, but I will. I don't know how she is on Ukraine. That's a good question. Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, Republican woman, actually Indian American, but doesn't talk about it very much. Thank you, Kanausi. Republicans, I think, like to pretend she's white because thank you, Kanausi. Nikki Haley is set to announce her presidential candidacy in February. Do you think she can win? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. If she does, how will she be on Ukraine? I don't know how she is on Ukraine, actually. She's a wannabe MAGA. She goes sort of back and forth on the Trump thing. She's one of those who criticizes Trump and then doesn't criticize Trump. She wanted to be his running mate, and then he hasn't been talking about picking her, so now she's going to run. So it's all of this la 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 la, and frankly, announcing that they're not announcing yet, right? Because they're announcing that maybe in 2 weeks. To me, sounds like she's almost trying to pressure Trump to pick her, right? That she's almost trying to make it where, well, I'm not announcing yet. So, something could always change in the next 2 weeks that Trump tries to get her not to run. She supports Ukraine, Cliff is saying. That's good. Okay, well, that's good. That's good. I mean, if she supports Ukraine, that's great. That's great. But, good for her. All right, but anyway, so, but I think she could win, sure. I mean, I think she's very smart. She comes across you don't have to like her politics. She's clearly a very intelligent woman. I think she comes across in a very business way. I always think presidential candidates should be businessmen or businesswomen, meaning coming across. Thank you, Addie. Coming across that way. Somebody who could run a boardroom. I think she comes across very professional. I think she doesn't come across weak. Now, this is the problem women have. Women are always faced with sort of the stereotype and the problem of either they're weak or they're mean, right? So they're always trying to not be one or the other because that's what they always get accused of. I think she comes across strong. I don't think she comes across mean. I don't think she comes across weak. So I think she could be a good candidate. It just depends then when you get into her issues and everything else, the issues she stands on, who knows? Thank you for that again. All right. So good that we got it as a Ukraine connection. That was good. Russian offensive. So there's been talk about a Russian offensive happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We've been seeing this in the last couple of days from the Ukrainians. Now we're hearing it. This was via Sky News from General Sir Richard Barons. I love how the Brits can do the general and the Sir thing together. General Sir Richard Barons, a former commander of the Joint Forces Command, says that he believes there's a realistic possibility that an expected Russian offensive could happen within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'll just read you this from Sky News. He warned the most likely outcome this year is that the two sides remain essentially locked in a stalemate and that we are nowhere near the end of this. The former commander argued that if allies are willing to step up both funding and weapons for Ukraine, then Russia can be decisively defeated. However, he said the easiest way to keep this war going seemingly forever is just to dribble stuff in and make it a score draw every year, year on year. I think he's absolutely right. The problem is this has sort of been the problem with NATO from the beginning. We've wanted to help Ukraine, but we're playing the whole we're scared of Russia, right? So we don't really want to help Ukraine enough. Only now we're giving them tanks, right? And the whole issue with the tanks, we should have given them tanks months ago. I mean, now we are hoping that the tanks we're giving Ukraine, mind you, they've got to be trained on them, they've got to be delivered, that the tanks get there in time for the Ukrainians to use them and implement them before a huge Russian counteroffensive that was, we believe, scheduled for the spring, late March, early April. But now there's already an offensive that we think is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, right? 2 to 3 weeks means mid to late February, not end of March, mid-April. I believe, I've said this before, I think what's going on in terms of why there's concern about a Russian offensive in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Putin, and we know this, and I've got a story a little bit later, Putin is a big micromanager, right? Putin is running the war. Putin should not be running the war, even though, presidents, commander-in-chief, or whatever you want to call it based on your country. Typically, presidents don't get into the day-to-day military planning stuff that Putin gets into. And Putin has a habit of literally telling him, no, you're going to do this. And I think the thinking is, thank you, Neil, for that. I think the thinking is that when the war got started, Putin basically told them, the generals probably told him that, look, we don't have enough men. We need more before we can do this effectively. And he said, no, go in now, right? Well, we saw what happened. The Russians got their butt kicked at the beginning of the war. I mean, they've effectively grabbed 18% of Ukraine. They had grabbed a lot more and they got kicked out. So it's not like the Russians didn't effectively cause a lot of problems here, but they've not been doing really well. A lot of that is happening in part because Putin keeps running the war. Well, anyway, coming back to this, deep. Oh yeah. So shoot, I'm forgetting again. I'm having one of those days, one of those weeks, guys, where every time I go on an interesting tangent about Ukraine, I'm like forgetting where I started the conversation. I'm just looking here. That we've got to step up the funding. Easiest way is to dribble. In any case, the topic we were talking about was, I think NATO from the beginning has been afraid of Putin's nuclear threat, and we haven't been supporting Ukraine as much as we know we should be. And what that gets you is half a war, right? We're helping Ukraine just enough so Ukraine can fight back, but not win. And, what does that get us? I mean, we already know. I think all of us accept. In the end, we are concerned that our people might not be there if we need to keep supporting Ukraine for years, right? I fear we might not be if this goes on for 3 or 4 years, right? This year, I think we're fine. Beyond this year, I don't know whether people are going to continue to support. I worry about that. Having a policy like we have, which basically is giving Ukraine just enough, but not enough, right? Just enough, but not enough, guarantees the war will be dragged out. And all Putin has to do is wait long enough for it to cause a situation where NATO stops supporting Ukraine. So anyway, I think this British general is correct that we're kind of dribbling out the support. Oh, I know what it was. I was talking to you guys about the tanks and how we should have gotten the tanks to Ukraine earlier. We only announced it really last week. The Brits were there a week or two earlier, right? Which was great. But otherwise, we announced the tanks last week. And what I guarantee you happened with Putin micromanaging the war, Putin told his guys, there are reports that a lot of these tanks are arriving. Well, not a lot. Some of the tanks might arrive soon, maybe. The Ukrainians need to train at least, the polls are saying today, the Ukrainians will need to train at least 5 to 6 weeks, okay? 5 to 6 weeks to learn how to use the Leopard tanks. And that would be a miracle if they could only train for 5 to 6 weeks. 5 to 6 weeks still puts you into March. And even if they could train in that period of time, they've got to get the tanks. And that's going to take a while too, right? They're coming from all these different countries. Putin, I guarantee you, said, okay, we're hearing that Ukraine is going to get some tanks soon, but they won't get most of the tanks until end of March, maybe mid-April. I want us invading again. I want a counteroffensive beginning of March so that it happens before the Ukrainians get the tanks. And his generals probably said, well, knowing his generals probably refused to say, boss, that's crazy. So all they could say is, jawohl, and do what Putin wants, right? So I think that's what's going on. I think Putin ordered them and said, you're doing a counteroffensive. I don't care what it is. You're doing it in the next few weeks. Now, the good news is that means, well, I said jawohl on purpose. I know it's not Russian, but that was the whole point of it. The good thing here is that I think Putin is rushing things. I think he's micromanaging. He's going to force his own troops to do something before they're ready, before they have enough men, before they have enough men trained, before those men have enough ammunition, enough guns, enough vehicles, right? So hopefully, and before the weather changes. The weather is a big deal too. It is hard to do these offensives when the ground is wet. Now, I think what they're hoping is that, because the ground's been kind of wet this winter. Winter in Ukraine has been kind of like it's been here in the States, Europe. We probably have the same thing where winter's been kind of warm, right? Actually, I know in Europe it's been warm as well. Yeah, because I know the energy usage has been lower in Europe this year, so that the Russian boycott hasn't been hurting as much. In Ukraine, the ground has been very wet and mushy, and unless that freezes, and maybe it's freezing now, maybe it's going to be hard for the Russians to do this. So let's see. In any case, all right, let's keep going here. I'm going long again tonight, but there's a lot of news, guys. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to do this one quickly because I think it's relevant, related. Ukrainian officials believe Russia is gathering its military might in eastern Luhansk, which is the most easternmost region of Ukraine, right next to Russia, um, ahead of a new, renewed offensive. That could be where the offensive is coming, is what some of the experts are thinking. The offensive in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Kremlin forces have been expelling local residents from their homes near the front line. And it's believed they're doing this because they don't want the local Ukrainians to basically tell other Ukrainian, tell the Ukrainian military, hey, we've got a whole slew of Russian tanks, we've got a whole slew of Russian artillery, so that the Ukrainians don't have enough intelligence on what's going on with the Russians. And there's an active transfer. This is from the Luhansk governor. There's an active transfer of Russian troops to the region, and they are definitely preparing for something on the Eastern Front in February. So this interim battle, the one in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if it happens, could be in easternmost Ukraine, Luhansk. But let's see if that's the big counteroffensive. I'm not convinced it is. Please do keep the super chat and super questions and the gifts on TikTok coming. I appreciate those, guys. A few more stories. Boy, I am going late tonight. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Chris, for the hat. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is what I'm saying. Like, and I've got a NATO story with Turkey coming up too. There's a lot of useful news that I think you guys need to know today. Thank you, Pam, for that. Netanyahu interviews on CNN. Israeli Prime Minister, very conservative. This new government is the most right-wing government in Israel's history. And Israel, as you know, has not been very supportive of Ukraine, has not been giving Ukraine weapons, and has not even been willing to give Ukraine some of Israel's technology for shooting down missiles, because Israel has got a lot of good technology for shooting down missiles, because it's one of the things that it worries about the most from its Arab neighbors and from the fighters. They are shooting missiles at Israel into civilian areas, and they want to blow them up, right? So Israel's been refusing to provide these to Ukraine. And listen to this. So CNN, Netanyahu is asked about this, whether he will consider sending military aid, including the Iron Dome, which is Israel's technology that's extra good at shooting down incoming missiles. And he says, well, I'm certainly looking into it. Interesting. I'm not quite sure why he wouldn't say no. Now, having said that, I think the reason he's not saying no is because the U.S. probably asked him to help out. He's been saying no, and he didn't want to say no publicly, right, while talking to the American media, and basically be outright, rather than, because up till now, Israel's been saying it privately. Thank you, Pam, for that. They've been saying it privately, right? They've been refusing to do it, but we haven't had the Israeli prime minister on TV going, no, America, I'm not going to help you, even though you helped me to the tune of $3 billion, was it $5 billion a year? I forget kind of what the aid package is we give to Israel every year. It's huge, and I'm not going to help you back. So thank you, Belle, for that. And Cheryl, that's my guess. I mean, I don't think Israel's going to help anytime soon. I hope they do. I don't think he's gonna. I think he's simply saying, oh, I'm looking into it, so he doesn't piss off the American taxpayers. Turkish President Erdogan, our favorite non-democratic friend, our favorite autocrat, is now saying that Sweden should not even bother applying to NATO. He says Sweden should not bother to try at this point. We will not say yes to their NATO application as long as they allow burning of the Koran. So Erdogan is a dictator, wannabe dictator. Turkey is not a democracy. And unfortunately, thank you, Pam, for that. Unfortunately, NATO is figuring this out a little late. The Europeans figured it out a little early, which is good. They haven't let Turkey join the EU because of what Turkey is doing in Cyprus. And we're now paying for it. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you let countries that aren't democracies in, or you don't punish them sufficiently. I mean, Hungary, not a democracy anymore, really. Not really. Poland was going that way. I will say Poland has been extremely helpful, their leader, but their leader, not the biggest Democrat. And when I say Democrat, I mean with a small d, supportive of democracy. Hungary, Orban's terrible. And this guy in Turkey is a joke. What he's pissed about is, and we talked about this before, there's a white supremacist that appears to have or be funded by people with ties to Russia. Big surprise. It looks like, I think Russia put the guy up to it. There's a white supremacist he's Swedish and Danish national, Denmark, Sweden. And he decides last week to do a protest outside the Turkish embassy in Sweden, right? In Stockholm. What's he do? He says, I'm going to burn the Koran. The Koran is the Muslim holy book. It is akin to the Bible for Muslims. Okay. So what does he do? He goes and burns the thing. Well, what do you think? Muslims in Muslim countries not really happy about it. And Erdogan turns around and says, well, that's it. I'm not going to let Sweden into NATO because, as you may recall, every NATO country has to vote, and it has to be unanimous to let new members join NATO. So every country but two have done it so far. Hungary supposedly was going to vote a couple weeks ago. They didn't. Now some folks were telling me the other day Hungary is supposed to vote in February, and Turkey is just finding reasons to say no. Up until now, I was thinking that the reason was because Turkey is trying to get more weapons out of the U.S., and I think they are. I think they absolutely are. But also, there is an important election going on in Turkey for the president, Erdogan, and for the parliament in May. And it looks like Erdogan is basically trying to, do what everybody says or what everybody does, which is basically play up to the people at home. He knows that right, religion, right? They're attacking our faith. I'm the defender of the faith, right? I mean, that works. That works in America too, frankly. And I think Erdogan is doing this because his poll numbers aren't great. His poll numbers are not great. Hang on a second here. I'm going to look here. Yeah, it doesn't happen on my, just so you guys know, I can't see the polls on the bottom of my screen. So they don't show up for me. We were wondering about that the other day. It doesn't show up on my screen. So I cannot see the poll. All I can say is enjoy it yourselves on TikTok. So I don't know. I'm not convinced he's going to let Ukraine in, at least until the elections happen. And maybe we get somebody better than him, or maybe after the elections, he feels like, okay, I can finally let Ukraine in and it's not a problem. But not Ukraine, Sweden in. We've got to stand up to this guy. I really don't see. I mean, it matters, but we've got to stand up. Meaning, I get that Turkey matters. Turkey is an important member of NATO because of where Turkey is located. It's the only Muslim country. Well, it's not the only Muslim country anymore, but it's I think it's right. We've got. I'm trying to think. Albania joined, still joining NATO. Help me here, guys. Is Turkey the only NATO, the only Muslim country in NATO? Because other than Albania, there'd be nobody else. But Albania, I don't remember if they're joining. Oh my God, you people, here's your map. Everyone's been freaking out on TikTok. They wanted to see the map. Armenia is not a member of NATO. Yeah, no, none of the guys you're mentioning are members of NATO. No. But yeah, my question is whether Albania had joined yet. That's my question. All right, guys, Albania's still a candidate. That's what some folks are. That's what I was thinking. Albania is wanting to join, but I don't think they're a member yet. I don't think so. In any case, so a lot of reasons why Turkey matters, but honestly, if they're going to act like this, I think we need to stand up to them. I think it's the only way you're going to stop this. All right. The new Czech president, who frankly looks like a movie star, says that we should let Ukraine into NATO. Thank you, Crusher. Spain is going to be sending 4 to 6 Leopard tanks. Poland is aiming to get the training on the Leopard tanks down to 5 weeks. I told you. European Union plans to train 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers, doubling their goal of 15,000. Lithuania just announced that they're going to be training 1,600 Ukrainian soldiers. Oh, and final story, kind of funny. This one made me laugh. Russia has just banned OnlyFans, which I just found hilarious. Actually, I found it hilarious that Russia even allowed this. Kind of crazy, but anybody who doesn't know, so folks are saying Albania is a member of NATO. Let me check here. Is Albania a member of NATO? NATO. I hate this. See, Google's better about this. Hey, Google, is Albania a member of NATO? Oh. Website NATO.in. They say the other member countries are Greece and Turkey, Germany, Spain, Czechia, Hungary and Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia, Albania, and there you go. You guys are right. Okay, Google, stop. You guys are right. Albania is already a member. There you go. So Turkey would not be the only Muslim country. Albania is Muslim as well. Right? Yeah, I know Albania is Muslim. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, see now I can see the poll. The poll results pop up for me at the very end, just so folks on TikTok know. Like I've got the results here. So should John show us the map? 95%. Cute. Oh, I see. And then the previous ones of supporting. That's very cute. Cute guys. Very funny. That's cute. Yeah, I can't pull it up as it's happening though, but I can at the end it shows me. All right, let me see here. All right, guys, that's it for the stories tonight. The OnlyFans thing just made me laugh. Make sure I didn't forget anything here. Let's do the questions. Again, I'm going to go late on the questions because I went late on the news tonight, but there were a lot of stories I thought were worth talking about. So TikTok, throw me your questions in the Q&A link. Thank you, Sig Sauer, for the gift there. Keep the gifts coming. Throw your questions in the Q&A link on TikTok. On YouTube, obviously, you can put the boxes at the you know what I mean. YouTube and elsewhere, feel free to use the comment box at the bottom. Okay, tiki-taki. Let me pull up the Q&A here. Q&A. Why did we send tanks requisitioned through DoD instead what we had in stock? So who is this? This is Just There for Cyrus. Cute. I assume what Just There for Cyrus is talking about is the M1 tanks that we're sending, the Abrams tanks. And what was announced was we are going to be having the tanks made. I think it's with the M1s that this was happening. I read something that we were having something we are sending over to Ukraine made rather than sending it from the stuff we've currently got. I think it's the Abrams that it's, so I think that's what you're talking about. All I can figure is, and I saw a administration spokesperson talking the other day about this, saying that we just didn't have any available. Yeah, straight from the factory. That's exactly what I read. We just don't have any available. Now, part of the reason they might not be available is, there you go. Dark Chef is saying pulling the armor. If they come out of stocks, we would have to make sure that they're tanks that don't have on the depleted uranium body armor or whatever, body armor or your reactive armor or whatever it is on the tank, because it's a super secret technology for defending the tanks that we don't let anybody have. And we certainly wouldn't let Ukraine have. Hey, Tyson. Oh, hey, Tyson. Good to see you again. Thank you for that. So I don't know how long it would take to remove it. Here's a thought too. The US has X number of M1 tanks. Okay. We have probably the number of M1 tanks that have this good armor on it. We've got just the number we want. Well, what happens if we remove the armor from those tanks and give them to Ukraine? We no longer have the right number of tanks we want that have this extra special armor. So if we go to war with China, if we end up going to war with Russia, we want our tanks and we want the tanks that have the armor. So anyways, I think my guess is two things. We probably determined that A, we can't give them the armor, so now it's going to take a long time to take the armor off. B, if we take the armor off, now we've got fewer tanks that have the armor, which is bad because we think we need X number of tanks that have this armor. C, the U.S. probably sees an advantage in having the tanks delayed. In other words, we've got to make them. It might take 6 months. It might take a year, right, for them to get it. Thank you, Meg, for the confetti. By delaying the tanks going, we make sure the Ukrainians are able to focus on the Leopard tanks, on the training, on using them, rather than having to now deal with the Leopard tanks and the Challenger tanks from the Brits and the American tanks and maybe the Leclerc tanks from the French, right? So it certainly makes it easier. So where are they actually, okay, but where are they coming from then? But where are the tanks coming from if they're not coming from our stocks, right? Why is it? I mean, then if they're not being made, where are they coming from then? I mean, I actually don't know where they're coming from. Okay, but then where are they coming from that's taking so long? That's the thing I'm not understanding. Asking you guys, I'm admitting this on TikTok. Thank you for the gift there. Nevada mothballed. Oh, from storage. Okay. But is the problem they've got to remove the armor, or what is it? I mean, I just know that that we've been talking about not having tanks available that we can provide. So it is the storage. Okay. Okay. They're loading them in South Carolina now. Yeah, but supposedly the M1 tanks, we claimed the M1 tanks weren't going to arrive for at least 6 months, at least. You know? Yeah, you're not getting your money back. Oh, okay, Red Dog. Here we go. Far right person. I love you. Red Dog, I'm going to guess that you've never wanted to take care of our people first. Red Dog's going, give us our money back. Take care of our. By the way, Red Dog is probably actually just red. They're probably Russian. Give us our money back. Take care of our people first. If you're an American, you're clearly a far right Trumper. And I'm going to guarantee, I'm going to bet right here, you've never wanted to do anything for our people first. You've never wanted to help people with healthcare, right? You've never wanted to help retirees. I mean, you've never wanted to do anything. You never wanted to help the poor. Never wanted to do anything. So I just love that when it comes from the far right people, when they're like, oh, if we didn't spend this money on Ukraine, we'd be able to help all these Americans who I otherwise would never, ever, ever spend a dime helping. Okay. Otanbat. Okay. That's not answering the question though. Yeah. We're trying to get the answer of quite literally, where are these tanks coming from? I mean, all right, we're seeing a disagreement here though. People are saying no new tanks are being made. Others are saying they're coming from storage. All right, guys, I'm trying to get an answer on this before I'm not going to end yet anyway. All right. If anybody can explain whether I do think part of the I think a large part of the delay is intentional. I don't think we want to get them those tanks right now. I don't think we do. I just don't think we do. And I think we had to promise we were going to get them to get Turkey, to get Germany to provide its tanks, but I don't think so. Okay. Coming from stocks and being refitted. Okay. See, but then, okay. Actually, no, thanks for saying that, because that's what I thought. I'll do a recap in a bit. Actually, I'm going long tonight because there'd been so much news. Okay. No tanks made since 1995. Okay. Let me just say, by the way, I am not the military guy. I'm the foreign policy guy. So whenever we talk about weapons, I try to sort of do my research first before talking about the weapons. The tank thing, I thought I had read that we weren't making them yet, but also I had read that we didn't want to have to necessarily remove the armor, so it wasn't clear to me where we were getting them from. No, thank you, Gallagher, for pointing that out, because I thought I'd read that we weren't doing that. But there's some other system. There is some other system. Oh, you know what it is? It's the GLSDB bombs. That's what I was reading about, some system in the last day or two that we are going to be making new ones to give them. We're going to be production, and maybe it's those bombs are the ones. I was mixing it up with the tanks, but I remember I was reading something and thinking in my own mind, why aren't we just giving it to them? But I think that's it. Okay. Anyway, all right, let's keep going here. Let me see here. There's a good question. Okay, Gallagher, I'm going to ask you and some of the others on TikTok and elsewhere. Elise is asking, do all of the U.S. tanks have the double secret armor, the super duper secret armor? When you say all of our tanks, you mean all the Abrams tanks. Okay, I'm already seeing no. I'm seeing yes. Etzel is a veteran as well. Etzel's saying yes. Tony's saying 90% yes. Yulia's saying most. I mean, no is still correct if almost all of our tanks do, but not every single one. The reservists don't. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. There are some that don't, but most do. Depends on the type. Okay. M1A3s. Okay. Well, I know there's the M1A1 and M1A2, right? And we're sending the M1A2s is what we're sending. Okay. Here we go. Okay. What else we got here? Hang on, guys. Pull up some more Um, oh, interesting. Ben is saying, don't know about the US tanks, but I know all of our Challenger 2 tanks do. Thank you, Inspired, for that. Now, the Brits, okay. Only, and again, let me tell you this right now, by the way, too. I, maybe to a fault, but I have no problem admitting what I don't know because this is something also, maybe I've learned it in law school, but I'm a big fan of asking questions. And it also always annoys me when people are sort of afraid to ask questions. So feel free to ask, and I'll ask you guys as well. Ben is saying, I don't know about US tanks, but I know all of the British Challenger 2 tanks do have the armor. I thought I had read that the U.S. armor was so secret that we didn't even export it to allies. So I'm going to assume when you're saying our tanks do, you mean sort of a British version discovered on your own creation of the armor is going to be my guess. Because as I said, I thought that was in the article that I was reading where they were saying why we won't give these tanks to the Ukrainians with the armor because such a big deal. Okay. Oh, you're saying reactive armor. Okay. Not like the depleted uranium or anything like that. Okay. That's what I was wondering. Yeah. But Challenger 2 armor is classified also, Callum is saying. Okay. Interesting. Chobham armor? Is that, I'm seeing everyone saying it. That's the Chobham composite. Whose is that? Is that the Brits or the Americans? Ceramic composite. Yes, that doesn't answer my question. Challenger 2 has Chobham or Chobham armor. Not sure those being sent will have it, though. Okay, that's the British. But both use it? Okay. Brits are ceramic. Interesting. Okay. All right, what else we got here, guys? Up. Let me see here. All right, pull up another TikTok here. Hang on. Well, I mean, this is an interesting question. Okay, Grayson St. Martin is asking on TikTok. It says, why would we threaten troops for Taiwan but not Ukraine? Meaning Biden said outright that when he was asked, would you send American troops to Taiwan if China invaded? And he said, yes, no hesitation. Okay. He said, is there a bigger risk of conflict with Ukraine? I mean, no, because quite literally Biden, when asked, said, if China invades Taiwan, will you send American troops to Taiwan? And he said, yes. So that means per se, we're entering the war in essence, if China invades, right? So that's a big deal. So it is not less of a risk of war, clearly, right? China has got nukes, Russia's got nukes. So that's no different. I think, kind of weird actually, because I think initially when Putin was getting ready to invade, we did not consider Ukraine even in the same ballpark as Taiwan in terms of America's national security interest. And I mean, I remember trying to explain this to a Ukrainian woman that I met in the park about why, I felt bad, but saying in terms of the American people getting involved in a war, in terms of really getting like our soldiers, Ukraine was not, it just wasn't on the same level as Taiwan. Taiwan, you've got historically America's promise to defend it. You've got really important Taiwan's semiconductor chip industry, which is the biggest in the world, and we rely on it to a humongous degree. Not just that, but you don't want the Chinese getting it. China's been trying to replicate their own semiconductor industry. They're doing a bad job, compared to the Chinese, to the Taiwanese. So having said that, I think Ukraine has clearly grown in importance for the West, clearly, and for America. It's no longer just genocide bad. We ought to help them. And we were thinking of Europe and, concerns about Putin in Europe. I think those concerns have grown exponentially now. I think we are much more concerned today than we were a year ago about Putin's aspirations and what he's planning in Europe next. And the concern, I mean, I put it that Putin's trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. He may not be trying to reconstitute it with every country that was in the Soviet Union, but I think the concept he wants back. He wants a lot of the land back, right? He wants Ukraine back. He definitely wants the Baltic countries back, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. He wants them. He wants Belarus back. We know that, he wants Belarus to be part of the bargain again too. And there is now a much greater fear of what Putin might do in Europe overall. Because remember, a year plus ago, we weren't worrying about tanks in Europe. NATO had cut back significantly. The Germans had like 2,000 tanks or whatever at the height of the Cold War. And I think they've got 250 or something right now, as far as in Germany itself, because we didn't need tanks anymore in Europe. The big threat in Europe was Russia during the Cold War, and the Soviet Union, I should say. And the Soviet Union dissolved, and Russia was Russia, but we weren't worried about a war in Europe. Now I think we're legitimately worried about a war in Europe with Russia again, So anyway, just sort of a long way of explaining this, but I think we've come around in terms of thinking of Ukraine as being thank you, Bonnie, much more significant part of America's national security interests than it was a year ago. Versus a year ago, it almost being more of a humanitarian intervention to a degree for America, I think, to a degree. Certainly strategic, but humanitarian. Let's put it this way. Maybe humanitarian, strategic, and now all of a sudden, humanitarian hasn't gone down, but strategic has gone up a lot, and seeing a much greater threat that Putin poses. And the humanitarian is still there because you've got Zelensky, you've got the Ukrainian people, and all of what they showed us at the beginning is still affecting us. Thank you, Grayson. We're still seeing the resilience of the people, the courage of everything from the Ukrainians and Zelensky himself, that it's making us more vested in helping them because now we feel like they're an ally. Or let's face it too, right? We've been inundated with news about Ukraine over the last year. Before the last year, how often did we hear or talk about Ukraine, right? Ukraine was, that former Soviet country that we're not supposed to call the anymore, right? And we still did. And the capital was Kiev a year ago. It wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't even, culturally for any of us, it wasn't on the agenda. And now, I think, for me certainly, but probably for a lot of you too, I've heard so much about it and followed it so closely and seen so many videos and their people and everything that I feel an affinity for Ukraine that I definitely did not have a year ago, right? They were just another former Soviet country that I didn't really know much about. Now I feel a connection with the country that wasn't there before. So anyway, but but I think that's why, at least originally, but actually, let me throw this in too. There is something that hasn't been explained. What I mean is we haven't, because NATO and everything worries about Russia's nukes. And supposedly, we don't say Putin's crazy. We simply say, well, Russia has nuclear weapons. And we don't want to get into a situation where we risk remember Biden himself, if we go to war with Russia, that means World War III, right? How do you stop nuclear powers from using nukes against each other? And then Biden turns around a couple months later and says, and they say, well, if China invades Taiwan, will you send American troops to Taiwan? He goes, yes. Okay. Doesn't that mean World War III with a nuclear power, which per se, we were just told repeatedly means nuclear war? What is it? So we really haven't had an explanation as to, and I think to some degree, this is getting back to your initial question. We haven't had a really good explanation does going to war with a nuclear power per se mean nuclear war in World War III, or doesn't it? Because with China, we keep saying it doesn't, and with Russia, we keep saying it does. So does it mean Russia? So which one is it, right? Frankly, if you're China, here's a problem too. If you're China, you worry about the economic sanctions of invading Taiwan. You worry about the military support for Taiwan if China invades. But do you really worry, even though Biden said yes, do you really worry that Biden's going to put troops on the ground in Taiwan when Biden is refusing to do it in Ukraine? Because Russia has nukes. Well, China has nukes. I mean, I think it's still a lingering problem for, I think, the entire civilized world, so to speak, that doesn't want China to invade Taiwan. I just I don't know. No, the economic thing is huge. The economic impact is very important, absolutely very important. But I worry. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Grayson. I worry that we're almost sending a message to China that we'll do the economic thing, we'll give weapons to Taiwan, but when push comes to shove, don't worry, the Americans will not go to war over it because the Americans have already said we don't fight countries with nukes because we're afraid it'll lead to World War III. And we've already made that clear, you know. So, any case, all right. Let me look another couple. We can do another few questions since, as I said, I went long with the news tonight, so I don't mind doing a good half hour of Q&A. Um, let's see what else we got here. Are the Russians running out of ammunition? You know, I've seen multiple things on that, meaning I've seen a lot of people saying the Russians are running lower. I've seen a recent report saying the Russians may have a good 9 months of ammunition at least, like keep going, no problem. They're certainly continuing to produce more stuff, right? Um, they got a lot of artillery from North Korea. They're I don't know that they've gotten them yet, but they're trying to. They've thank you, Hazel, for that. They at least requisitioned or whatever a lot of these longer range missiles from Iran. I think were these like the 450-mile missiles, something like that. But I don't know whether it range, but I don't know whether the deal is happening or not, because had they been arriving, we would have heard about it. But you know, oops. No. Do you think this war will lead to Russia attacking other countries like the British? No, because Russia isn't going to touch any NATO countries. I mean, unless we bomb Russia, Russia's not bombing us, because once they attack the British, they've attacked all of. I guarantee you, not only is there the NATO protection, but I guarantee you, Russia attacks the British, and that means Russia is not just at war with Britain, but they will be immediately at war with America. I guarantee you. I mean, short of Donald Trump being president, and I couldn't tell you, Joe Biden being president, we will be at war with Russia if Russia bombs Britain, and Russia knows it. So that ain't happening. Yeah. Anybody in NATO, he's not attacking anybody in NATO. Is there any kind of anti-nuclear missile system? No, nothing that works. Nothing that works. I was actually people. It's funny, nobody's asked that in a while. People were asking this early on in the war, and I did a bunch of research on it. And what I'd read was just what I told you, was nothing works to really stop nuclear missiles from coming in. The most effective way at stopping them is apparently getting them like as they're coming out of the ground, basically. But good luck with that, right? Because as soon as they're out of the ground and in the air, they're very difficult to hit. And then they go up into the stratosphere and then come down, crashing down. So it got to be hard to stop. How do you stop? You can't really catch tanks. You can't really catch submarines. Nuclear submarines can hide very easily. Russia's got them. America's got them. France has got them. Britain's got them. So those can't be stopped. And then again, they shoot in the air. And once the missile's in the air, good luck stopping it. So no. But I will say that is one of the reasons. Thank you, Hazel, for that. That was very generous of you. That is one of the reasons why a lot of folks like me think the nuclear threat isn't real from Russia, because we can't stop their missiles. They can't stop our missiles. So if Russia were to fire on us, they could destroy New York and Chicago and Washington and everything else. And then our nuclear submarines would destroy them. And that would be the end of the world. And they know it. So they wouldn't do it. The big concern that Russia had, the Soviet Union had, with Reagan's Star Wars program, right? The Strategic Defense Initiative, they were worried because they perceived it as being, in essence, a first strike weapon, because the concern was, I loved the idea, though, of having a protection against nuclear missiles. But the concern, if you're trying to figure out like the game theory of it, right, of a Russian America fighting a war, if America has a technology that can stop incoming nuclear missiles, then what is stopping America from firing nukes at Russia? Because Russia can't respond. Because if Russia responds, we just blow their missiles out of the air, right? So the concern was, from the Soviet perspective, was, the SDI, the Star Wars program, would have given the Americans a chance to actually fire their weapons first and get away with it, or vice versa. If the Russians do it, that would be our concern. So, but again, it didn't work, and it's a lot of money and very hard to do. Worldwide EMP, that would be the was it called Revolution? What was the show called? I watched it for like 1 or 2 seasons, but it wasn't very good. Thank you, Elle, for the hearts there. Where basically something happens and the entire world loses electricity. Anything that works on electrical power stops working, which is really interesting. But yes, that would be like an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, because basically the idea is you blow up a nuclear bomb like in the atmosphere, maybe not the atmosphere, but over a city, and the electromagnetism, the pulse coming out of the nuclear explosion would knock out any electronic device. It would just kill it. So, or at least temporarily. I don't know whether you can bring anything back, after that, but that was what somebody was asking about. Oh, all right, guys. I think we may call it quits here, and I'll do the quick summary here. So just looking here to see anything else good. Throw in your final questions or comments or anything here. I don't work for Biden. If I worked for Biden, I'd be making a hefty salary, over $100,000 a year. So I wish I did. Work for me. I have to rely on my TikTok gifts. So no offense. Love my TikTok gifts and my YouTube questions, but wouldn't be asking you for help if I were working for Biden. All right, I'll look at one or two more TikTok questions. Thank you, Cliff. I didn't mean to spur you there, but thank you, Cliff. I appreciate that. All right, so another quick look here at the TikTok questions, and then we'll go here. Thank you, Hazel. Oh, that was cool. I don't know that I've seen that before, Hazel. Mystery firework. That's very cool. I don't think you see a DBZ. I don't think I've seen that before. That was really neat. Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, read the Olympic Committee will let Russia compete under a neutral flag. Why would they be allowed to do so? Because the International Olympic Committee are a bunch of wusses. But I mean that quite literally. This is what they do. They always cave. They suck up to totalitarian governments. I mean, this is what the history of this organization has been, just to suck up to the worst of the worst. So yeah, and international sports in general does that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had the World Cup in Dubai. But yeah, that's literally why. That's why. Well, again, Eastern Ukraine. I don't know. Do you think Eastern Ukraine could be vulnerable to attack now? I just don't know. I mean, clearly, let's sort of end with this. Clearly, sort of where we started the show was that Russia. The concern is, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Russia may be planning a big offensive. It may not be the big spring offensive, right, which might not be till April, but they're planning one soon because Putin has probably ordered them. He heard about all these Western tanks coming. Putin got pissed off and said, I want a big show of force before those tanks get here. So they go and the Russians plan some big fight. The thinking is it might be in Luhansk. Okay, I'll show you the map. We haven't used the map much tonight. Luhansk, which is in eastern Ukraine. Luhansk is this, more or less, this region right over here. Okay, most of Luhansk is occupied by the Russians, but so over here. And Russia, mind you, this is Russia. Okay, all of this on the border is Russia. So it is certainly an easier area for Russia to attack and move into. I mean, well, they're already here, but they want to get the rest of Donetsk, which is the province next to it as well. So easier for Russia to add more troops, easier for Russia's supply lines, because Russia's right here, right? A little bit harder, the supply lines when you're down here because you're going across all of Ukraine. So the thinking is that possibly in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Russia may be doing some kind of a big offensive in Luhansk. You know, we're going to find out, but there's been enough chatter about it that it makes me think it, the Ukrainians have talked about it. We've got the former British general talking about it. It makes me think that there's some intelligence showing this, and we're all getting a little worried about it. So anyway, all right, guys, I am going to do a quick summary of the stories we covered today and then call it quits. We've gone for 1:20, which has been pretty good. I'm going to skip Discord again tonight. Sorry, Discordians, but I've been going late these last few shows. I apologize, but when I go late like this, I don't want to like stress it with my voice and go late on and then go and apologize for doing the Discord thing. But I promise tomorrow night I will cut the show back if I have to. So hang on here. Russian missile has completely destroyed a residential building in Kramatorsk, Ukraine. Lots of casualties. Boris Johnson is visiting Washington, D.C. this week to lobby Republicans to support aid to Ukraine. Among other things, he's pushing for Ukraine to get F-16s. He talked about Taiwan and Ukraine and how Ukraine is showing the Chinese exactly what we would do if the Chinese invaded Taiwan. And his argument is that if we give up on Ukraine, then we are telling the Chinese that we would be giving up on Taiwan as well, and it would make them more likely to invade Taiwan. Johnson also says Putin will not use nuclear weapons because of the message it would send to the rest of the world, and it would destroy Putin's relations and his economic relations with the rest of the world. I then mentioned, which I just said right now, concerns about a Russian offensive in the next 2 to 3 weeks in eastern Ukraine and Luhansk. Ukrainian officials believe Russia's gathering its military might there, that there have been reports of the Russians moving citizens from the front lines, which is just more proof that something might be happening soon. Israeli military aid to Ukraine. Netanyahu, the prime minister, was asked on CNN about it and said, well, I'm certainly looking into it. It's something. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. Turkish President Erdogan now says that he will definitively not support Sweden's bid for NATO membership because some lunatic burned a Koran in front of the Turkish embassy and Erdogan's mad or whatever. The new Czech president says Ukraine should be let into NATO as soon as the war is over. Spain is preparing to supply 4 to 6 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Spain is also sending 20 M113 armored personnel carriers. Poland is hoping to get training on Leopard 2 tanks down to the German tanks down to as little as 5 weeks of training for the Ukrainians, which would be pretty amazing if they get it to that short. And a village in western Poland near the German border is hosting one of 3 Leopard training centers in Europe. The others are in Germany and Switzerland. Oh, that's interesting that it's in Switzerland, considering Switzerland kind of, the non-aligned thing, but they're training Ukrainians to use German tanks. Kind of interesting. European Union's planning to train 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers in total, doubling their initial goal of 15,000. Lithuania has announced that they're going to be training 1,600 Ukrainian soldiers this year. And Russia banned the OnlyFans website. Sad? Oh, well. All right. Oh, boy. All right. Shouldn't have gone this long tonight, but I did. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thank you for hanging out. I can see a lot of the TikTokers still hung out, so thank you, guys. I appreciate that when I go long, which at least makes me think this stays interesting, which I hope that's true. Thank you, mods. TikTok, as usual, seemed a little like you had the crazies invading. YouTube, not as much. Otanbot, that's okay. Are you out of sync? Oh, that's all right. You've been popping in pretty regularly. Thank you for the gift. Who was that? Magical Photo. Appreciate that. And I'll be back tomorrow, guys, as usual, Thursday night. Remember, anybody who's interested, the airplane, the Russian fighter jet parts that were shot down over Ukraine. This auction ends tomorrow around 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. I've only got 2 more boxes after this of these guys. Get your bidding in now if you want it. Thank you, Hazel, for that. Half of the proceeds go to Ukraine. Half of the proceeds go to support my work. So thank you for that. And there's other stuff there as well. Discord.aravosis.com. And that's it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Set your calendars. Remember, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., maybe just set a reminder on your calendar. It might be the easiest way to do it. And do please, final point, follow and subscribe, because I'm really bad at that. And I keep forgetting to ask you guys to do it. So please follow and subscribe on TikTok and YouTube and everywhere else. It helps. It helps me. It helps my account. Helps people to see the news I'm providing. And that's it. I'm gonna go. I promise you guys we will do a Discord tomorrow, because I know it's been a while. But I need to take a rest now after an hour and a half of this. Oh, Patreon too. Yeah, you can find the Patreon. Did I even promote? I don't even think I promoted my Patreon tonight. I didn't. You're right. Thank you, Captain. I do have a Patreon as well. Finally, patreon.com/Aravosis. You can find it at aravosis.com. You all can find it via the link in my profile. Patreon's a really neat way where you can basically support somebody $5 a month, and they get a steady income that way, which is kind of nice, because that way, you can plan your bills a little bit more. So I definitely appreciate the Patreon help if you guys can give it. Thank you. All right. Thank you for reminding me of that. That was nice of you. All right, guys, let's all have a good night, and talk to you again tomorrow, 6 p.m. All right. Later, guys.